Good morning, Redeemer. My name is Kelly Litch, and I will be doing the scripture reading this morning. If you'd like to turn with me, we're looking in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. We're going to start with verses 24 and end at verse 27 at the end of the chapter. 1 Corinthians 9:24. Do you not know that in a race all the runners compete, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body, and I keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified.
All right, thank you, Oklahoma State Cowboy Kelly. Appreciate it. He's riding high today. Hey, glad you're here. My name's Dusty. I'm one of the pastors. Really grateful that you all are here. And we're going through 1 Corinthians this year. And we're going to, in some ways, today will be the second half. A good friend of mine, former member, Jordan Strebeck, spoke last week on chapter 8 of 1 Corinthians 8, or did all chapter 8 and then the first half of 9. And so the first part of the sermon today is going to be, in some ways, a bit of recap, which will be great because a lot of you are new and the first time here, maybe you're in with friends or family. And also just a little bit of a rehash, and then we're going to cover into those last few verses that Kelly just read that'll be new today. That are those verses. There's a good chance if you're my age that you had a poster with these verses, like with maybe Karl Malone getting a rebound. You know, it's like, hey man, I'm gonna train hard. I'm gonna make varsity next year, kind of thing. Would be that verse quoted, and then I'm gonna get that rebound, and that's what I'm gonna be. And I mean, maybe yeah, for sure. But this passage is interesting that it is in the context of what we've been talking about in chapters 8 and chapters 9. So we're going to get into that. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Mine was, I ate way too much, mission accomplished. So hope that yours was good and good to connect with people around you and all of that. So the theme today is, again, going to be a bit of a picking up from where we were last week, which is that for a lot of us, our preferences and our rights are the most important thing to us. Like our sense of comfort, like what's important to us is the most important thing, more so than Jesus and even Jesus's work and Jesus making sense to people around us. And that's going to get pushed on today, where Jordan pointed this out last week, that for us, that you think about this, like our whole country fought a war over rights. It's like, so this is really important to us. They were like, no, we're going to have these things. And we have a Bill of Rights. And then plus on top of that, we are from Texas. We really like rights. And then more than that, we are from West Texas. Like we really, 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 really like our rights out here. And that can be like really beautiful and good. There's like a really positive part of that. And then there's like a dark side to it that we've got to watch here. And this is exactly where the Apostle Paul is going to press on us a bit. So what I want to do is I want to go back through verses 19 through 23 that were touched on at the very end of last week that I think will be a good bit of a setting the conversation for today and a good recap that'll get, if you have never been here before or you've been out for a few weeks, this will get you just caught up immediately. So let me read through these. Verse 19 says, for though I am free from all, and what Paul means is, look, I'm free from, he did not take his right of, he worked and he has not been compensated for that. That's really specifically what he's talking about. He had that right, but he said, I'm free from all. I've made myself a servant to all that I might win more of them. To the Jews, I became a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law, I became as one under the law, though not myself being under the law, that I might win those under the law. So he's talking about Jewish people, and he's saying, hey, look, I'm freed from at least the ceremonial aspects of the law, like some of the dietary holiness type laws in the Old Testament, like can't eat pork, those kind of things. He knows he's free from those things, like that Christians can rightly eat pork and many other things, like the holiness, cleanness laws in the Old Testament, that he's free and he can do those things. But he's saying, look, I want to reach my Jewish friends, that nothing's more important than Jesus, and he might be willing to give up some of those rights. And he says, to those outside the law, in other words, Gentiles, I became as one outside the law, not being outside of the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I've become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel. And that's, the gospel means Jesus' death and resurrection. I do it for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings. So what Paul is not saying here is that, hey, if you want to reach like crime bosses in the underworld, that you need to, be a crook and I'm going to do what they do. Like, here's the thing, where the Bible's really clear on do this and don't do this, like that's end of conversation. Like we don't steal or whatever, all that kind of stuff, right? Like we're not going to do that so we can reach people at least under the guise of that. But this is specifically on areas that are areas of freedom where you might actually biblically be free to do something that you might, because that right is not ultimate, you might be willing to forego that right so that Jesus would make sense to someone around you. You might be willing to do that. You might be willing to engage your Jewish friends, Paul's saying, and I might become kosher to them in a way, and I might continue to abide by some of those Jewish dietary laws so that there's not an unnecessary barrier between me and them. And to my Gentile friends, that I want to be able to reach them. And again, not talking about being wishy-washy in terms of morals. This isn't moral relativism. That's not the case that's being made here. But on areas of freedom, there might be situations that you actually pull back on that freedom for the sake of Jesus making sense to someone. There's nothing more important than that. So I'll give you an example of this. That's one of the clearest examples of, because where this passage can go, like it's easy to teach the passage on here's what it meant. The challenge can be like, what does it mean for us? Like, what would this mean for me to do? 1 Corinthians 9. And so let me give you an example that's, I think, an easy, direct correlation to this. It's been probably about a decade, but a few years back, I went to go see some of our goers that lived in the Middle East. And at this time, a lot of these people aren't quite as young anymore, several of whom are still there, which is really neat. But they were at that time in like their mid-20s, all right? So they're pretty young, and not surprisingly, who they would have relationships with there were a bunch of, some of these were couples and some of them were just single guys, but they would have a relationship with, young Arabs that were in their 20s. And so these guys in particular would hang out with what in Arabic, there's a word for these young dudes there, and they call them the shabab. All right, and they're exactly what you think they probably are. They're 25 years old, and they'll pull up in a Porsche, and they work a little bit, a few hours a day. They'll sleep in, work for a few hours, then it's like an extended long nap time, and which sounds awesome, by the way. I think we ought to institute that. And then maybe, or maybe not, work a little bit more in the afternoon, and then pretty much all night long kick it. You know what I mean? They'll go hang out, set up a campfire, and just hang out, and hang out till wee hours of the morning, and then repeat. And so here's the thing, that our young goers at that time, that they were trying to reach the shabab. That's really who the main relationships they had. And to reach the shabab, they in many ways became like the shabab, not adopting like beliefs and all those kind of things. But if you think about it, from a biblical standpoint, were they free to wear shorts? I mean, it's like 8 million degrees. Were they free to wear shorts, both the men and the women? Yes, they were. Biblically speaking, they're free. Were they free to drink a glass of wine over a meal or have a bottle of beer? Biblically speaking, as long as you're not getting drunk, not coping with life through that, yes. Were they free to have like an American work schedule where you wake up early, get a workout in, work 8 to 5, go to bed early at 9:30, whatever, or they have a good recovery for the next day? Were they free to do that? Yes, they were. And many other things like that. Were they free to have a good smoked rib? Are they free to do that? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. But what they did was they gave up their rights so that Jesus would make sense. To reach the shabab, they became like the shabab. And so they would, they'd sleep in, and they would hang out with people afternoon way into the night until 2, 3 a.m. and then just repeat that. They actually gave up those rights. They wouldn't eat pork. They weren't wearing shorts. They were doing things so that, because you think about it, if you'd have had some of these people over, and you were to throw a pork rib on the smoker, and they're like, the conversation would be over. Like they're leaving, the whole thing's over. And why would I get in the way of Jesus making sense for someone over a pork rib or wearing shorts or anything else like that? To reach the shabab, we need to become like the shabab. So that'd be an example for that. And by the way, we've got lots of shabab in this room that basically already are in that lifestyle. And for some of us, maybe you need to go do that over there. I don't know. You never know. Go be that guy or that girl overseas. Never know. But even one last point here before we move on to today's passage, that if you've ever seen some of our slogans here, you'll see it on t-shirts and in our building and our website and all that. Even our sign outside says that we're a gospel-centered missional family, disciples making disciples. And that missional word is really what we mean here, is that missional means not that we want a worship service that, where an outsider would feel comfortable, even though we do. Like if you're new, like you're exploring Christianity, you're new at Redeemer, like we want you to feel comfortable here, but that's not actually what we mean by missional. What we mean is you, with the people that you know in your world, that you are doing whatever it takes that isn't like, biblically or morally wrong. Like you're doing whatever it takes because Jesus is the main thing for you. You want Jesus to be understood and experienced and known and believed in, and it's everything to you. And so that's what you're doing, is you're trying to remove barriers. To a certain degree, you're thinking like a missionary in the world that's around you, that you're engaging it that way and trying to eliminate unnecessary cultural barriers. That's what every missionary we've ever sent out is doing, is trying to figure out, okay, what are the unnecessary like American baggage I might bring into this situation that might make it hard for someone to follow Jesus? I want to eliminate those things and make Jesus the main thing. And that's really what all of us are called to do, is what Paul is saying. Nothing's more important than Jesus, even including our rights, preferences, comfort, the approval of people, you name it. Let's keep moving, because verse 24 is I'm going to pick up, and again, this is where that poster you might have had, if you're a Gen X kid, you probably would maybe have these verses on it, and but it's in this context of this whole conversation we're having today. And let me just walk through these few verses, and we'll talk about what it doesn't mean and what it does mean. Verse 24. Do you not know that in a race, all the runners run? This was making an athletic analogy. So this is right in my wheelhouse. I'm ready, man. Here you go. But only one receives the prize. So run that you may obtain it. So what Paul's doing here is saying, all right, I want to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. This whole conversation about Jesus being the most important thing, me being willing to set my rights and preferences down so that Jesus would make sense to you as well. I'm just going to make an analogy. It's like running a race. And all the runners run, but only one wins. Only one wins. So he's going to make an analogy of like athletic training for a specific athletic goal. So let's keep moving. Verse 25, every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So he's making an analogy here of like, okay, so when you run in that race and you've got a goal, and that the people that do that win a wreath, that'd be like in a Greek culture, the way of saying like they run it to get a medal or something like that, or a trophy or a ring or whatever it would be that you're trying to get. And that's what you're doing when you're competing athletically, is you're in it for that deal. He said, but we're actually going for an imperishable wreath. In other words, eternal life, like something that lasts forever. The stakes are so high. We're talking heaven and hell. We're talking about eternity. We're talking about being with God or possibly not. And like that is what we're pursuing. In verse 26, he says, so I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and I keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. So he's carrying that analogy out and saying, just think about it. So like, let's say you're trying to train for a half marathon, or you're on the B team last year on your middle school basketball team and you want to be on the A team, or you want to be a varsity starter to help your team next year, or whatever. You want to be, you're a high school athlete, you want to be a college athlete. Doesn't matter what you are. You're a couch potato and you want to get to half marathon. It could be anything like that. And what it talks about to get there is like there's a certain amount of discipline. You can want to be on varsity all you want, or want to be a college athlete all you want, but I'm going to tell you what it's going to take to get there is you're going to have to put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shots up. Is what it's going to take. You're going to need to dribble and dribble and dribble and dribble and dribble and dribble and dribble. And there's not going to be like, you're going to need to do it all the time. And you're going to need to go when all your friends are just hanging out and they're playing Xbox, you're going to need to be up at the gym running full court. And same thing with a half marathon. It's like you can say all you want to about, well, no, my heart, I want to run a half marathon. Like that's like, it's kind of a state of being and a state of mind. It's like, well, maybe, but like to actually run that half marathon, you're going to need to make some dietary commitments. You're going to need to wake up early and go run when nobody else in your family is out running. And there's like these level of commitments and build up, and like your whole life, your diet, what you eat, when you go to bed, like there's this like single-minded focus of I'm in it to win it. I'm going after that, metaphorically speaking, that wreath, and I want to make varsity. I want to go to college. I want to run the half marathon. I want to be on the A team. And here's all of the things I'm doing, that extra rep in the weight room, that extra 15 minutes of shooting, that extra watch to my diet, whatever it is. And I've got all these things that I'm doing here together that they're all about getting there. And even that last part of that verse is one that I've read several times this week. is like really like a frightening verse. And I don't think it's talking about like eternal life, but it's saying that, hey, look, there's like a level of discipline even over my moral life, over my doctrinal life. Because what a bummer it would be to preach hundreds and hundreds of sermons here at Redeemer for me, for instance. Like this part is where it really resonated with me. It'd be very unfortunate to be disqualified, not like lost in terms of salvation, but like again, using this metaphor of the race, it'd be unfortunate to have done all these things because I didn't take great care over my soul and what I believe and what the Bible teaches, my life and my doctrine. Be very careful here. So the point to all of this is making that athletic analogy of like, all right, all that commitment of what it took to run that race, to do the half marathon, to make varsity, to be a college athlete, like translate that into the spiritual realm, and then that's where we pick up with. So on that note, here's what this passage is not saying. This passage is not saying that any kind of obedience or discipline is legalism. I've heard that quite a lot over the years, where someone will be like, "Yeah, I don't got to go to church. I don't got to read the Bible. I don't want to be all legalistic about it. I don't got to give money. I don't got to do all these things." And it's like kind of true and kind of not in a way. Like it's true in that that we are right with God because of Jesus' grace, because of the cross, because of the resurrection. But it's just a really weird spot to say that any kind of discipline that I engage in as a Christian is like legalism. Legalism is when you think doing a certain thing makes you right with God or improves your standing with God or makes you better in some way. But just, again, switch the analogy back to athletics, like this passage is saying. Can you imagine saying, no, I want to run that half marathon, or I want to be on varsity next year, or I want to be a college athlete, and not being willing to put in, like, develop certain practices, like along the way, practices and disciplines and habits that would take you to this place. This passage is not saying that grace is somehow antithetical to discipline and practices of being a disciple of Jesus. It's not saying that. This is also not saying, like verse 27 in particular, like where it talks about disciplining my body. This is not saying like a Holy Grail, if you've ever seen that movie, type of self-punishment where the monks walk around and they say Latin and then hit their foreheads with a big thing of wood. We're not talking about that, all right? Not talking about that either. We're not talking about, because there are certain traditions that are like, man, that what they think this verse means is I'm gonna put like a piece of clothing on, or I'm gonna put like a bracelet on, something that's gonna hurt me physically, and then I'd be obedient to this passage. That's not what this is saying. It's also not saying that being a Christian means that we just need to say no to things. That I don't think that's what this passage is saying, because really, if anything, this passage is saying yes to the right things and the better things. This isn't a call to stoicism or asceticism, where stoicism is just where you're emotionless and where joy and laughter and having fun are basically out. It's not saying no more fun. Stop it. That's it. It's only Jesus, as if Jesus and fun might be on different pages as well. It's also not saying we need to be detached and emotionless in every way. It's just saying no to every desire, like that every desire you have is bad. It's not saying that either. There's a lot of desires that could be expressed in a beautiful way that'd be obedient to Jesus. It's not saying any of that. So what it is saying is that the biggest question is not, is this thing allowed, or is this within my rights to do? But the biggest question is, will this help me love Jesus, and will this help other people love Jesus? It's actually the only question that matters. Our rights and preferences, they do matter. They're just not ultimate. That's what he's getting at. Another thing this is saying is that the Christian life is a fight. That it is. I think for a lot of us here, that we imagine, I did for a long time, I thought there'd be a point when I would kind of arrive spiritually, where some struggles I was having, I would finally get to a point where I just wouldn't struggle with those things anymore. But here's what I've learned, that I'm really grateful when I hear a story of someone that was like an alcoholic or a drug addict, and one day they just woke up and didn't want to do that anymore. God healed them of that, freed them from that. Grateful for you. To me, that is exactly the same as a stage 3 cancer person that gets healed. I believe God does that, and I'm thankful. Here's what's more likely for a lot of us is whatever you struggle with, you're struggling with as you woke up this morning, good chance you're going to struggle with it tonight. Really good chance it's going to be waiting on you tomorrow. Really good chance in 20 years, you're still going to be fighting, all right? And this passage is actually saying that, is that, think about it in the athletic context, is you're disciplining and you're walking in these practices, but there are these things that are kind of working against you in the middle of all that too, and it's going to be a fight. It's going to be a struggle. I think another thing this is saying is that there's not any neutral here. And walking with God and making Jesus the first and most important thing is that you're either moving forward in that by his grace and with his help, you're either moving forward in that, or you're kind of going to neutral in the same exact way as you think about competing for a race. You're either improving and you're getting in shape for that race to make varsity, to play college, to do that half marathon, or you're going in reverse. There's never any neutral on this. It's either forward or backwards. I think that's one of the things it's saying. And then finally, this is maybe where it is that we really try to dial this in, is that we just get so easily distracted. What all of us are going to be prone to is that we're going to be focused on the thing that's right in front of us, raising our family, our career, navigating singleness in the dating world, making money, trying to work through our schedule with challenges that we've got, all that. And we just get so distracted on what life is all about and what's really worth pursuing, what to give ourselves towards. And we're running a race, but is it the right race? We're certainly pursuing a prize, but what's that prize? Is it just a pile of money? That people think you're awesome, that you're really powerful, whatever it is, but we just get so distracted and we chase lesser things. So here's what I want to do is I want to just conclude with like a few things of what this might mean for us. Last week, without really elaborating on it a whole lot today, that Jordan mentioned a few that I thought were really good. A couple he mentioned in particular where he mentioned alcohol. I thought that was a really good one, where you're free to drink that glass of wine. But you may have some friends around you that's a struggle for them and that it wouldn't be helpful for their faith for you to drink around them. That might be an example that I thought was really fair and good about what some of this would mean to have that single-minded focus on Jesus. Or not even, I've seen this happen a lot, where friends that know, people that know that they're free to drink alcohol responsibly start putting pressure on their Christian friends or maybe even non-Christian friends to engage in that same freedom that they've got. Man, come on, man, what are you all like, legalistic or what? Or putting pressure on them. And that might be an example of a freedom that you give up to serve someone else, to help Jesus make sense for them, to help them be obedient to Jesus. That might be an example he mentioned. Another example he brought up was social media, that you're free to have your hot take socially on social media. You can. You're not like, it's not sinful to have your hot take on whatever it is, football or politics or anything else. You can, but is it helpful? He even also made an extension to this about like posting all the pictures up of kind of like your highlight reel of your life and only putting those pictures up and kind of curating the really incredible things that would even, the design of it would be that you'd have this enviable life that might actually be kind of destructive for people, feeling left out of your life, maybe envy of your life, some FOMO, fear of missing out. He just raised those questions of just interesting thought here. And I wanted to mention one more. Pray for me because I'm going to go into this. We'll see what happens. So I was thinking back to COVID. Yeah, I was thinking back to that. And I hated it, pretty much all of it. It was miserable to lead in the middle of COVID. Miserable, truly. Certainly for people in the church, but honestly, a lot of business owners in here know exactly. Like you had decisions to make and it was really hard. It was no win. Maybe the worst of all, I think, that got smacked around badly were like school administrators, just got killed during that time. It was very, very challenging. Politicians too. It was a really difficult time. But I do think there's like, when I thought about this passage about, okay, what would this mean for us to do this? I actually saw a really beautiful example of it in the middle of that miserable time. So I'm going to see if I can fairly describe the two camps, specifically with masks. I mean, really, this is good fun, isn't it? All right, so you tell me, I'm going to try to be as straight down the middle as I can be with this, and you tell me if I'm representing it fairly. Okay, so you had one group that did not think that masks helped much, if at all, like scientifically and whatever, that they're like, I just don't think they help much. And number two, I don't think that government should be telling me that I must wear them, all right? That's fine if people want to wear them. I just don't think that the government's, it's overreach for them. It's an infringement on my personal rights and liberties to make me wear them in places I don't want to wear them. And therefore, like I'm free. I have kind of sovereignty, so to speak, over my own body to do what I want to with that. And I just don't think that people should make me do that. All right. So does that sound right? Does that sound more or less like the arguments and the perspectives? There'll be loads of people in this room that would see it that way. All right, you had another group of people, and I think there's strata inside of this other group, and you can see why this was such a challenging time, is you had another group of people that they themselves were, or someone that they loved very much were, a bit vulnerable to COVID. Like they had an autoimmune issue, they had their cancer immunosuppressed, they were either they were or someone close to them was, and that they were vulnerable. Maybe they were older, and we all knew that people that were older were more vulnerable to COVID. And so their perspective on this group is like, hey, look, I know even if it doesn't help, even if it doesn't stop it, if it helps some, that I or this person I love is not going to feel comfortable coming to worship or gathering if some of the people there are not wearing masks. And would you mind doing that so we could feel comfortable coming, or this person that I love could feel comfortable coming? There's even other strata in this that they themselves weren't vulnerable. But what it communicated was that, hey, look, would you be willing to do something for other people? Would you be willing to help in that way if you could? And there's all sorts of different strata of viewpoints even in this camp here. But does that sound roughly accurate? Is that group as I'm describing it? So here's what's interesting, is you can see how there's a real impasse here. One group that doesn't feel like it helps and that don't personally feel like they need to wear one, and another group that actually feels really vulnerable and wanted this group over here to wear masks for their benefit or for people around them. Now there's other groups too that maybe had political objectives and who knows what, but you had these two groups of people. And by the way, even on the aftermath of this is stuff that people don't really talk about. I've heard multiple people be like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with people that saw it that way. Like, I don't want anything to do with people that were on that other camp. But let me tell you about a beautiful expression of what I feel like would be 1 Corinthians 9 that I did see in the middle of all of the absolute no fun of COVID from 2020 through about 2021 or so that was really beautiful. So as an example, I saw people in this first group that didn't feel like they really needed to wear masks, that weren't convinced that they helped, didn't think government should make them do it. But I saw a lot of folks that were willing to say, you know what, do I feel like I need to or that I should? No. That I'm mandated or like morally, biblically that I ought to know. But you know what I'm going to do is I don't want there to be any barrier in someone hearing the good news of Jesus. I don't want there to be any barrier for someone gathering together or even coming to my place of business or worshiping or whatever. So I'm going to put on this piece of cloth, and I'm not 100% convinced it helps, but I'm going to wear this for the benefit of other people, even if they just think it's what they need, and they may even be right, but whatever the case it is I'm going to do this out of love for these other people around me. And I just thought, what a beautiful expression of love that was for someone that didn't feel necessarily morally obligated to do that, but did that for love for other people so that Jesus would be the most important thing above all. So here's the thing, to even be more direct, some of you are here right now like have major objections to this and are like, not that right there, buddy. But here's the thing, is that I would just throw this out there, that if you have major objections to this, it could be that your political ideology has moved to the first place more so than Jesus, and making him known and chasing that prize and the imperishable wreath being the number one thing, that Jesus is the most important thing, more even. Liberties and rights are beautiful, they're great. And here's what's interesting is even on this debate, you had these two groups, that one group was maybe giving up their rights out of love for someone else. But here's what's interesting. On another issue, you might be the person that is really vulnerable with alcohol, and you need someone to be willing to give up their rights to help you follow Jesus. And you need someone else that would be willing to say, I can do this, but I just don't know that it would be really helpful for this person for me to do this in the same way. On different issues, our consciences are going to have struggles. We have non-believing friends all around us in the city that you are sent to make Jesus make sense to them. And here's the question, is this is the real question that's being called from 1 Corinthians 8 and 9, is Jesus the most important thing in the whole world to us? Is it words or is it real? And if Jesus is the most important thing, there is nothing that's more important than me knowing Jesus, me walking obediently with Jesus, and that my eyes are set on the prize. I'm running this race. I'm doing all these things that nobody's going to see, and I'm disciplining myself to continue to follow him. And then when it gets to a point when it could be a barrier for Jesus making sense to someone else, it's easy for me to forego a freedom that I can rightfully do and not wear the shorts, not put on the pork rib, not have a bottle of beer, put on a mask, whatever it is, out of love for our brothers and sisters and people in our community so that Jesus would make sense to them. And my hope would be is that all throughout this room, that Jesus would be the most important thing. And even as an invitation to you that have never followed Jesus, that this is really the life that I think that God is calling us into, is to say that he's beautiful, he's worth it. And the other things we live for are not ever going to satisfy in the way that he can. And that's my hope for everybody here. So let's pray. Lord, would you do something beautiful in the lives of the people that are here today, and that Jesus would become the most important, more than anything else, more than rights, as beautiful and right as they are, and our own things that we get to enjoy, that obeying you and making you known would be the first and most important thing, above all. And Lord, would you be the most important thing, more than our political affiliations, more than our own sense of what is right and wrong, but your word would